Hi everybody, how are you? It's Mike Andrew. I'd like to provide a video to provide practical as well as actionable advice to enhance your executive or professional presence, especially when it comes to executive presentations, when you're making presentations to senior management. Executive presence is one of those subtle things that people watch. You're always being watched, and especially when you're making presentations to senior management. So I want to give some advice that I think are very practical and actionable. What generated this idea? A couple of things. One, I've realized that so many times in the past I've been invited in to listen to a presentation as the person is going to get ready to present to a board or to senior management. And I would give them advice. I would give them feedback, and they would agree with it, but then they wouldn't change. I'll talk about this in a minute. And the other thing, I came across on social media some tips from Steve Jobs about making executive presentations, and some of them I really liked, and I'm going to add on to them. So remember, when you're presenting, there's that notion that James Hume, he's a former speechwriter for a number of U.S. presidents, used to say that every time you speak, you are auditioning for leadership. So just as you're being watched when you present. So Steve Jobs came up with this first item that I thought was pretty interesting, pretty cool. He said, simple is sexy. Simple is sexy. How many times have you seen presentations that are very complex? You end up spending the whole time reading, 50, 60, 70 words and the graphs and charts, trying to understand it, and you're not really fully listening to the presenter. Not good, not good. Simple is sexy. And stay away from jargon or acronyms, so many times I've been in meetings and say, what does that mean? And they would have to explain what the acronym means. And stay away from cliches. How often do we hear today about innovation? This is innovative. Not everything is innovative. It might be a nice change, an incremental change, but not necessarily innovative. The same thing with transformation. Not everything is transformative. So if it's transformative and innovative, great, prove it, show it. But not everything is innovative and transformative. So keep things simple. Simple is sexy, according to Steve Jobs. The second thing is related to this is keep your slides to a minimum. Minimum slides with minimum text. They say facts tell, stories sell. When you're presenting, you're trying to influence, you're trying to sell. And if you're just telling with facts while people are trying to read all the writing, it's not going to work. So with each slide, with each point you're making, try to give an example, an illustration, because people we all love stories. We can relate to stories. I think we're wired to enjoy stories. And when you're presenting, I always say, well begun is half done. So when you're presenting, when you're introducing the topic, the presentation, start off with the story. And in your own words, do it in your own words. Be yourself, be genuine, be authentic. Years ago, I remember I would make presentations to senior groups and I would try to be perfect. And it may have worked to some point, but I found that oftentimes when I would make a slight mistake and I would joke about it, people loved it because you're being authentic, you're being yourself, you're being genuine. So being genuine and authentic, being yourself impresses much more than being perfect. So get away from a slide with 50, 60, 70 words, because everyone like myself, we're reading the slides, we're reading each word, we're looking at the graphs, trying to understand it. We're not really listening to the presenter. Now that makes all the sense in the world to me. So simple is sexy, keep the slides to a minimum, facts tell, stories. So I used to get feedback so many times, your slides are too busy, it's not going to work. And they'd say, yeah, you're right. And you know what? They don't change it. I don't know if they're trying to show their knowledge or if they feel they're compelled to give all the facts. You can give the facts in your own words. Years ago, I used to be an advisor to some boards, and I was asked to evaluate the effectiveness of these boards. And I had this process in place. It took about 6 weeks for each board. And when I finally presented a stack of information and I would present to the board 3 slides, and each slide had 3 bullets. The first slide was general observations. The second slide, the 3 things that the board is doing effectively. And the third slide was 3 things that the board can improve upon. The boards loved it because it generated great discussion. It was simple, easy. And by the way, the more senior you present to, the more simple you better make it be. They're not impressed with busy slides. They have 100 things on their mind. They need simplicity. They need to get to the point. The other thing is when you're presenting to maintain your presence, make sure you use balanced eye contact. How often do you see someone might just focus on one person during most of the presentation, or focus on that side of the room a little bit more? Get everybody's attention with their eye contact. It's a subtle thing, but people notice that. And finally, the traffic light analogy that I've used in the past, green, yellow, red. For each slide, try to think of the traffic light. So for the first 10, 15 seconds on this new slide, assuming the slide is simple, not busy now, you've got their attention for 10, 15 seconds. It's a new slide. Then think of the light start turning yellow. Hurry up and make your point so you can get ready to move on to the next slide, because when the light turns red, you begin losing people. So keep the momentum going, and with the green, yellow, red. Again, simple is sexy. Keep slides to a minimum. Stop the cliches, the acronyms, the buzzwords. Facts tell, stories sell. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.